Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this week we don't have enough campaigns to do a full 2-back or not to back, and so as usual on Monday, when I don't have a 2-back or not to back, I do keep the video Kickstarter related, and this one's going to be a fun one. This is one of those videos where I don't make a ton of friends, which is usually the kind of videos you guys like the most, understandably so, and we're gonna go into things. I'll explain, I'll give caveats, I'll do all the things. I'll try to do as good a job as possible to fairly present everything, because this video is 10 Kickstarter marketing practices, 10 Kickstarter Fomo marketing practices that unfortunately work all too well, with examples, and it's the examples part that usually gets me in trouble. But we're going to go ahead and start off with the inspiration behind this video, which is Bear Mountain Camping Adventures: A Race to the Top. This is the video that this is the game that directly inspired me to do this video. As you can see over here, 12 days left to go. That's a lie by the time you're watching this video. There's 5 days left to go on this campaign. It's still an active campaign. Feel free to back it by all means. I unfortunately pulled my pledge on this because of what I'm about to say, because of the thing that inspired this video, and it's not. This is where I have to be very careful with how I present things, because I am going to go into 10 different Kickstarter marketing practices, and the goal of this is to make sure you're informed, to make sure that you're aware of the various approaches and techniques that get you to try to back campaigns, and if you still want to back those campaigns, that's totally fine. Lord knows I've defended CMON enough that I am not here to sit there and say, this is bad, that's good, this is not. I am going to go into all of these, again, with examples, and yes, CMON is in this video as well, don't worry about that. We're going to go ahead and start off with this one, which this one is falsely limiting pledges. Falsely limiting pledges on their campaign. Specifically over here, Bear Mountain Camping Adventures, one of the things they're doing, and they have a bunch of things that they have been doing, some of which are present in other campaigns as well, but one of the things they've been doing is they have this principle, this concept of these pledges over here, this $99 pledge over here, the all-in deluxe edition. There's only 16 left out of 4,640. Except by the time you're watching this video, I guarantee you that number, 4,640, is not the same. That number has changed by the time you're watching this video, because that number has constantly been changing. But it's a great price. It's $99, and if you don't get that bundle, it's going to run you $145 instead to get the same exact bundle if you miss out on those pledges. So you better get that $100 bundle, because it's so much better, and there's only 16 copies left, except there's not 16 copies left. They keep adjusting the 4,640. Now, when presented with this in the comments, when asked about it, they talk about, hey, the thing's exploded, it's doing so well, and so we are monitoring, and there might be a point where we have to stop inflating or adjusting those numbers, which is, frankly, a lie. It is a lie, which is one of the reasons why I have a problem with this one, more so than any of the various techniques on this page. Some of them might bother you, by the way. We're going to talk about them. There's 10 different things. Some of them I'm involved in and I'm guilty of, and we'll get to all of them. This is going to be criticizing everyone to a degree, or making you aware as possible, but I will say on a personal level, this one crosses the line for me compared to others, because this one, more so than others, feels like a constantly changing lie, a constantly updated approach to what's happening, and the goal is to incentivize a false sense of FOMO on this campaign. Oh, go ahead and get it, there's only 16 left, but there really isn't on this campaign. Now, ultimately, like many other marketing pledges that we're going to talk about, marketing concepts we're going to talk about throughout this video, they're doing it because it works. And there are other times throughout this video where you will be lied to because it works, because it does unfortunately work, and it does get people to back more, and everyone will have their own line in the sand of what bothers them versus what bothers me versus what bothers you. We'll all have our own lines. My goal here is not to overly criticize Bear Mountain Camping Adventures. Again, the fact that I'm okay with one lie but not this lie is my own personal line in the sand as far as what I like or don't like or comfortable with, or where we tend to go. Ultimately, as usual, things in marketing are done because they work. That's a big unfortunate deal with all of the 10 things we're going to talk about today. But so one of them, and this has been done before, by the way, this is not the first campaign that's doing it, it's just the first campaign that I think I felt victim to on this one, which is also probably why we should get into this, which is why I'm probably more bothered by this than I should be, because I didn't know or realize it was a thing, which might have me a bit more frustrated with this compared to things I already know exist, and take that into account as we go through this. But either way, Bear Mountain Camping Adventures, inflating pledges as you go and telling you, hey, by the way, 16 left, 12 left, 10 left, oh, look at that, there's 55 more to go. Number 2 is going to be, and again, I said throughout, whether you're friends of mine or not friends of mine, whether I know you, whether I work with you, everyone's being covered in this video, don't worry about that. But the next one's going to be Fractious Sky from Ivy Studios, and this is just the general aspect of just flooding you with marketing. The goal here, like I said, to go through this over here is not necessarily to talk about things I do or don't have a problem with. Some I do, some I don't, but just to make sure you're aware of the various marketing things that do work. They do, practically speaking, work. With over $1 million raised on Fractious Sky and Ivy Games is general, Ivy Studios, Ivy Games, they are generally very good at this, at making sure you see their games everywhere. You're going to see their games with Facebook ads left, right, and center, with Instagram ads left, right, and center. If you scroll down to the content creator section on this page, if we go all the way to the bottom here, there's a large page over here. If we're just going to slowly scroll through, make playthroughs, now we're going to scroll through over here. Let's just scroll, scroll, scroll. Keep scrolling, more videos, more videos, more videos, more videos, more videos. This is in addition to the Instagram ads, to the content creators, to your YouTube feed, to the Facebook ads, to every single thing. The amount of content, and again, there are many other companies that do this as well, but the amount of absolutely being flooded with seeing their game everywhere, it happens because it works. It means you are exposed to their game, you see their game. By the time you see their campaign, you almost feel a sense of familiarity with their game. There are companies that will market their game for a year and a half before the game ever launches, so by the time it launches, it's not some new thing that you have to wonder about. There's a sense of familiarity there, and it's a sense of familiarity that breeds a degree of more willingness for you to go ahead and jump in on it. Again, these things are done because they work. Ivy Studios puts in that marketing budget because it works. It does not mean that you should or shouldn't back the game. It just means that marketing works. Everyone who sits there and ever said, hey, you know, billboards don't work on me. Companies don't spend that money because it doesn't work on you. That Super Bowl ad that you're so dismissive of, the millions of dollars they spent to go ahead and promote it, well, they did it because it works. They do it because it does have an ongoing effect. Remember that Super Bowl ad with the chunky milk? The people spitting out the chunky milk? You remember that? The flip side is I don't actually remember what they're actually advertising. So there is that side of things, but it was a good ad about chunky milk. Maybe it doesn't work on me. I don't know, but I assume it works on me to a degree. These things, advertising happens because it works. It has that residual effect. You see it enough, and again, it's not about right or wrong. It's not about good or bad. Understand that companies plastering your, and this happens as much as it does with Facebook ads, as much as it does with just seeing every single content creator under the sun covering that game. There are a lot of campaigns I've seen that have 30 content creators covering a game, and that means that no matter who you're subscribed to, you're going to see it show up 3 or 4 times. And with every single technique we talk about throughout this video, it's going to pull in people and push some away, but ultimately it pulls in more than it pushes away. Those escalating pledges from Bear Mountain, it's going to have a result of pushing away some people like myself who are like, I don't know if I like that, but it's going to pull in far more, which is why that's done. That's going to be true with every single thing we cover today. The marketing. There are people I know who will see an Ivy Studios campaign and they'll be like, nope, I've seen it advertised everywhere, and therefore it's not a good game and I'm not getting it. But ultimately it pulls in more than it pushes away. Number 3 is going to be fake funding goals. I'm using Bloodstone for this one, just because they nearly doubled their funding goal with $300,000 raised out of $150,000 before Bloodstone canceled this game. By the way, James Hudson, if you see this video, please bring back the game. I want Bloodstone. I had a chance to play Bloodstone, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm very, very disappointed that does not exist yet. There is a campaign page you can follow for their next campaign whenever it does show up, but in the meantime, Bloodstone over here canceled with a funding goal of $150,000 and $300,000 raised. There are dozens of campaigns I can point to that do this, and then the tricky part about fake funding goals is that for every campaign that cancels and you see the fake funding goal, there are more that didn't cancel, because there are more that actually saw the numbers they wanted to see. There are so many campaigns that will put $40,000, they'll make $150,000, and you never knew about the fact that had they only hit 60, had they only hit 70, they would have canceled. So the tricky part of a fake funding goal is more so than any other lie you see here is you never even really realize it's a lie in so many cases. You'll point to the ones that cancel and be like, you lied to us, but you don't care about the so many others that didn't have to cancel, and therefore you don't realize that they were engaging in that same lie. That same aspect that, unfortunately, again, this goes back to the same idea. Why does Bear Mountain put those limited pledges? Because you see it and you're like, I should get my hands in it, and therefore you go ahead and back it when you otherwise wouldn't have. Similarly with a fake funding goal, ultimately when a campaign sits there and says, hey, you know what, we need $400,000 to make this game, so we're going to put $400,000 as our funding goal, many people see that and they see the fact that day one it hasn't crossed the funding goal. Day one it's only at $200,000 raised, and people sit there and say, oh my gosh, this is struggling, and so they don't back the campaign. versus that exact same campaign with a $100,000 funding goal, and they hit $200,000 in day one. The other hand is people see that and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm all in on this, and before you know it, they've crossed $600,000 because they were willing to lie about the funding goal needed. Fake funding goals in general are a lie. And again, see my own hypocrisy as to why I'm okay with one lie but not the other. To me, I think the line that I personally have is the constant changing of the lie it almost feels like I'm being gaslit to a degree of constantly changing that number, because at least the fake funding goal is a singular point in time. But that said, it's still ultimately you being lied to for the sake of seeing higher numbers. The justification of why I'm okay with one of his other is my own justification, but ultimately it's still a conversation around the fact that you are being lied to incentivize higher funding, and it's a lie that works. It's a lie that gets people more invested in the campaign, and sometimes the success is to the point that you never even knew or realized you were being lied to, but fake funding goals do work. People are invested in that degree of success that comes with the campaign. The companies I can point to that have used realistic funding goals in the past have seen their campaigns either not fund at all or fund less so because people are scared by the sense of failure around something, even when it's not failure. We've just become used to the fact that everything has to fund in an hour. If you have to say in your campaign, hey, we funded in 24 hours, that's almost a strike against you. 24 hours funding, you should be funded in the first 37 minutes and 12 seconds, because otherwise, who is even your target audience? And so fake funding goals is going to be the third marketing tactic that unfortunately and realistically works. Which is where we get to CMON over here. CMON is definitely present in this. And again, I just picked example campaigns for each of these. With Zombicide, White Death, this one is the slowly increasing of the price point. Don't get me wrong, there's a few things we're going to talk about today that CMON is guilty of, but guilty of is the wrong term, that CMON engages in, and you can decide for yourself whether you care or don't. But in general, CMON has a track record of continuously escalating that price point for you, and that loops you in. It gets you invested before things get too scary, effectively. You see a campaign, Zombicide, White Death, and they launch with a pledge level. It's $100. It's a lot of money, but you know what? I can justify that. But then before you know it, a week into the campaign, there's a $40 ad, and another week later, there's a $30 ad, and then a $40, $50, $60. By the time you know it, you get to the end of the campaign, your $100 that you had to convince yourself that you are okay with has now ballooned to $285, and that's the new price point that you're at, and you never had the opportunity to make that decision knowing full well what you're getting yourself into. Some companies do this. Some companies sit there and say that day one, here's your $100 price point, here's your $200 price point, and here's your $350 all in. Some companies do that. But practically speaking, if I had to give them advice as to what to do, I'd advise them not to. I would say, don't do that. Like, why would you intentionally scare people off? Instead, you kind of want to just like have a lower number. That's something that's, it's there. And then over time, you showcase the things that are being added. It adds excitement to your campaign. And more importantly, it doesn't scare off the backer. The problem is what it does do is it has that effect of people who don't know that they should expect this. By now, I've backed so many CMON campaigns, I know that this is the trend, and so when I see that $100 price point, I'm like, great, $100 price point, is it going to end at a $200 all-in or like a $600 all-in or somewhere in between? But I know that's coming, and so I'm fine with that to a degree because I know it's coming. Again, this goes back to the nature of, and I will say, this is different than the stretch goal, the fake funding goals, or the escalating limited quantities, because at least there's no lie being presented. There's a lack of information, but that's different than a lie. So it is a step better in terms of if we're looking at this from, what's okay or not okay. But ultimately, CMON does have a habit of slowly escalating that price point. So you're mentally invested. Instead of saying $400 and walking away, by the time you have to walk away, you already mentally bought the game. You want Zombicide White Death. You're expecting to get Zombicide White Death, and now it's something extra, and so, do I just get the base pledge? Maybe. Like, that's okay, I guess, but now I feel like I'm missing out. But, like, if I walk away entirely, I already mentally bought that game, and so you do have that aspect. Again, you will see people who see another price point, and then they're like, nope, I'm out of the whole thing. It will scare some people away. But far more people will slowly either stick with their current pledge or just continuously escalate along the way, and you do pull people more into this. And so escalating, not slowly increasing the price point as you go is an effective marketing tactic for crowdfunding games. Moving on to number 5 over here, we have S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Specifically over here, this is going to be early bird and follow notifications. Newsletter rewards or early bird rewards, any sense of early engagement to follow this campaign, subscribe to this newsletter, and you'll get this extra thing for free. You'll get that, that little miniature, you'll get that extra promo pack, you'll get these things, and if you don't do this, you'll pay an extra $5, $12, $7, whatever dollars for that game, for that extra bit, if you don't follow this. And again, lots of campaigns do this, and again, similarly to different levels here, at least there's no lie lying going on here. There's no obfuscation of information, but it is a marketing trick that is effective. It works. It pulls you in. You see that campaign that you're interested in getting your hands on it, and you see, well, you know what? There's a newsletter sign up, and I don't know if I want the game or not, but I don't want to pay extra for that, so I'll go ahead and sign my newsletter. I'll do whatever. I'll follow the campaign. They are effective tricks to push you into getting that freebie. You've mentally gotten that $5 off your campaign. You've mentally gotten that, whatever it is. And this is the same with early birds as well. This is the same thing where you have an early bird where, day one, if you back the campaign, you save $10 on the pledge, or you get that extra thing. Whether it's a follow notification, whether it's a newsletter notification, whether it's an early bird, they all fall under that same principle of trying to mentally invest you early on to give you that sense of now versus later. Get it now before that early bird pricing runs out. Follow the campaign before you have to pay extra for this thing. And it both invests you into taking action earlier rather than later, but it also invests you in the idea that that's something that's yours to lose. When you follow the campaign and you don't back Stalker the board game, you're not getting that free thing you already unlocked. If you are one of the people who got an early bird pledge, that first 24 hours you saved $10 in the project, if you drop out at that point, you are giving up that thing. You no longer have that thing you already got, so it mentally invests you into the thing. It is effective marketing because it works. Yes, some people will jump into the campaign later and will sit there and say, you know what, I have to pay $12 extra for this miniature, so I'm just not going to back the campaign. But the vast majority of people will still go ahead and take action early on and feel invested, and they are effective marketing tactics. And by the way, I will still advise you, whenever there is an early bird or a follow notification or a newsletter notification, I'll advise you that exact logic. Go ahead and follow or back or whatever. You can always cancel later, but it's effective because it's true. It works. It's practical, and it makes sense, but it is still marketing to a degree. Over here, number 6 over here, I want to be very mindful of how I present this one. This is, again, Fantasia Games. I told you, whether or not I like the company is not a conversation here. Many of these companies I am huge fans of, and I don't necessarily have a problem with some of these things versus the others, but they are all marketing tactics and tricks that work. And this one, despite loving Fantasia Games, this is one that I have grown more sensitive to over the past maybe 6 months, maybe a year or so, and that's the obfuscation of paid versus unpaid content. Now, I want to be very, very, very clear here. I have no problem whatsoever with a company engaging in paid content. I have no problem with a content creator engaging in paid content. If you follow our channel, if you follow Board Game Co., by the way, like and subscribe and all that stuff, but if you follow Board Game Co., if you watch our videos, you'll know that we do a ton of reviews, but we also do paid content. We do paid previews, we do paid playthroughs. This is not at all a dig on either the company or the content creator for engaging in paid content. What this is specifically a problem that I have is the obfuscation of what is and isn't paid or unpaid in Kickstarter campaigns, in crowdfunding campaigns, both in terms of testimonials. Testimonials are the biggest issue. If you scroll down over here, you see the very first testimonial is from Rado, unconscious mind, strong candidate, da-da-da-da-da-da, etc., etc., etc. And if you watch Rado's video, you'll see Rado spends the first 10 seconds telling you this is a paid preview, take that into account, understand that bias, and Rado does an excellent job of always showing that in every single video. But if you don't know that, if you don't know Rado, if you don't click to that link, this first thing you see is going to be a thing that says, look how amazing this game is from paid content. Again, it doesn't mean that the quote's a problem. It just means you, as the consumer, should know and understand when there is that paid content attached to something and you go through a game. And I find in particular, testimonials are a huge problem where it's just not clarified in crowdfunding campaigns, as well as when you scroll down to all the videos. And then again, I picked Unconscious Mind in this particular one, but there are so many campaigns that do this, where they talk about, hey, here are our reviews and previews, and they don't necessarily distinguish or showcase which ones are which. And so as you go through the list of 15 videos, you don't understand necessarily that 12 of those videos were paid content, which doesn't necessarily mean they don't have value, but you should understand the value they're presenting. And in particular with testimonials, one thing that I've started to do, that Board Game Co. has started to do over the past 6 months, as this becomes something I've been more aware of or sensitive to, is I try to no longer give quotes or testimonials to something that was paid content. I'll still give a testimonial, and I can't guarantee 100% because of when I started and stopped doing this, so take that into account. But in general, I'm comfortable giving a testimonial when it was a review, but I try to avoid giving testimonials when it was paid content, because on the page itself, unless that testimonial is tagged as being paid content, it obfuscates the information you have as the consumer as to what is what as you go through these. And so as you scroll through these over here, you'll see that so often that the paid content is just mixed in with the other content in a way that is not always clear, and that has the effect of just, hey, great testimonial from something, and you just don't have that full information. And so that's obfuscation of paid versus unpaid content when you're doing a campaign. Moving on to there, we're going to dive into the Elder Scrolls, and this one, and again, I told you, no one's safe here over here, but the Elder Scrolls Chip Theory games, and this is something that I am guilty of as a content creator, but the specific, I guess, sin you want to call it, whatever you have over here, is controlled presentation of a product. This is something that has definitely become true over the past several years with Ivy Games, with Steamforged Games, with Elder Scrolls, as companies start doing these media trips effectively to showcase their game. And I understand why these trips exist. Sometimes there's limitations to how many prototypes are actually in the wild. I know Elder Scrolls in particular, I think they were walking around with 2 prototypes the entire campaign, so they just didn't have prototypes, and so a content creator trip made sense. Sometimes it's an issue of controlled presentation. You want to showcase a game that doesn't have a great rulebook, and you want to do a good job showcasing how that game is, but you want to make sure that the content creator is not trying to stumble through a prototype rulebook that doesn't clearly showcase. I understand why these trips exist, but it does mean that whenever you have a company with a content creator trip around the product, around the demo, you are definitely getting a controlled presentation, but it also means you're getting again, keep in mind, I go on these things. I will never tell you something I'll never tell you something that isn't true when I'm covering a game that I went onto a trip to go cover. At the same time, it's definitely true that you are more likely to not want to participate or contribute your feedback if it's something that wasn't for you. I'm not in a rush. I've been fortunate enough to not have this happen yet, but the first time I go on one of these trips and I hate the game, I don't know what I'm going to do. I will 100% never tell you that I love the game or I like the game. And even again, even using Ivy Studios as an example, if you see my coverage of Fractured Sky, it's a game I like. If you see my coverage of Mythic Mischief, it's a game I love and will not stop talking about. And there's a difference between those two things because one I liked and one I loved. And so hopefully you see that difference. What happens the first time I don't like it at all? What happens the first time that's just not a game for me? How do I present that information? Because I'm not going to tell you something that's not true, but I might hold back from just talking about something at all if it wasn't a game for me, because I don't want that sense of, that you have a controlled environment, you have a controlled framework. You are likely to be having a better time as a content creator because you are hanging out with your friends on this trip that you just had a overall good time. It definitely biases, and it's, that rulebook aspect. If you're getting a catered demo of a game and not having to wade through the rulebook, Chip Theory Games, as much as I love them, one of the bigger critiques they have is that their rulebooks are often a lot of information and their games are hard to learn. You know what's easier? Having someone from the company walk you through that game. You know what you don't get as the end user, the end buyer of that game? You don't get a rep from the company walking you through the game, and so it's a different experience. And so you do want to be mindful of those trips. I'm not saying to ignore them, I'm not saying to not watch those videos, take them into account, but understand the bias and the controlled environment that is present whenever you have one of these trips where you're being showcased the game in a whole different environment or mindset. Moving on to the next one over here, we talk about bad math on savings. And this one, again, this is all over the place, but the particular one I'm going to pick is the Last Kingdom board game. I remember this one as being a particularly egregious one for me because of the language used that I did not appreciate. But in general, very often in crowdfunding campaigns, you'll see savings promised. You'll see a degree of, oh my gosh, you're saving 20% of the game. That's incredible. That's why you should back this game now. The problem is very often that's just bad math. Very often by the time you back the game, by the time you pay for shipping in a situation where you might not pay for shipping, if you're buying it from Miniature Market, from Cool Stuff Inc., from Game Nerds, you might not pay that shipping price. By the time you factor that in, very often you're paying MSRP or sometimes even more, and the savings is non-existent. The specific aspect over here that I had over here is the incredible value. Why should you back this game on Kickstarter? Incredible value. The retail price is $70, but by backing on Kickstarter, you're saving $15. That's a fantastic deal you won't find anywhere else except every single online game store. This specific sentence was why I picked this campaign as a demo, because I thought that sentence was an extra unnecessary level. Very often you see this over here. Very often you see the presented savings that's not actually a savings for most people. But the idea that it's a fantastic deal you won't find anywhere else, you will find this every second, you'll find it all the time. Every online game store will have a $70 MSRP priced down to $55 or less with free shipping. It's a better deal. Crowdfunding over here is not the best deal. Buying it online at your local online retailer is the best deal. And so that presentation of savings where it's not actually present. Savings off of MSRP is great, except the problem is generally at any online game store, you're saving anywhere between 15 to 25% on savings before you even get into sales, before you get into any sales. And that's with free shipping. And so whenever a crowdfunding campaign presents you a discount off MSRP, do the actual math. Look at your online game store. What's their discount on MSRP? Look at the fact that you're paying for shipping here. You won't be paying for shipping there if you get like a $100 order or whatever it is. Factor those things in before you just take a presented savings at face value on any crowdfunding campaign. More often than not, the savings is either negligible or non-existent, and only infrequently is it actually a large savings. I'll actually give credit. I'll jump back to Beer Mountain over here. I'll give them credit. They had like savings of like 40% off MSRP, which even once you factor in shipping, that is a good price point. And so sometimes you do get good price points, good savings, but it's not when you're saving $15 on a $70 price point, which is what you'll get online anyway, but this time around you're paying for shipping. Now again, to be fair to Last Kingdom over here, they did have other things. They had, get it first over here. They had support the creators. They had getting free sleeves. They did have other things at play, but this particular line that's a fantastic deal you won't find anywhere else. You'll find it everywhere else. Moving on to over here, number 8, I guess, or 9. What are we up to? I think we're up to 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're up to number 9 over here, Foundations of Rome, and this is the nature of exclusive content. And again, come on, we'll have this left, right, and center as well, so will many other campaigns, but Foundations of Rome as a Kickstarter exclusive game that only existed on crowdfunding definitely falls into that category. But the nature of any form of exclusive content is inherently an advertising technique that does push you into buying the game. If you can't get the game later, if you can't get that extra thing later, if you can only get your hands on it now, well then of course you're going to want to get that thing more. There's a sense of urgency, a sense of need, a sense of just wanting that thing. And whether it's an entire game like you see over here, or whether it's come on with their latest campaign and that Kickstarter exclusive content and their stretch goals that you can't get otherwise, those are all things that do incentivize you to back it on crowdfunding, and they practically speaking work. And as usual, like everything else here, it pushes people away. Down the road, you'll have people who won't get a Zombicide game at retail because if they can't get everything, they don't want any of it, and so it pushes them away from the campaign. You always will have people who are bothered by the thing, and it will lose them customers along the way. But you'll also have people like myself who sit there and say, you know what, sure I can get it at retail, and I can possibly get it cheaper, but the reason I'm getting this now is because this is the best way to get my hands on all these extra goodies that I do want, and so it will always help, and it will always hurt, but it helps more than it hurts. Exclusive content is fun, and it's a great thing to have, and it's a better thing to have if you know you'll like the game, if you think you're probable to like the game. But otherwise, it's another FOMO marketing technique that does unfortunately work and does pull you in to backing things that you otherwise wouldn't have considered backing. There's a lot of crowdfunding in general is a delicate balance of how do you convince somebody to spend money now instead of spending money down the road. And that's why you always have these aspects, because the companies are trying to engage in whatever does work to try to get you to buy the thing today that you otherwise have the opportunity to buy it down the road with more reviews, with more anything, with more information. And so you have to engage in something to try to enforce them. And that could be better pricing, it could be the perception of better pricing, it could be exclusive content, it could be cheap marketing tricks, it could be any of these things are all designed to get you to back now. And the last one is very similar to this one, and for this I'm going to use The Witcher Old World over here, although there are a few campaigns that have done this particular one, and it's probably similar to exclusive content, but it's specifically locking exclusive content behind all-ins, behind higher level pledges. This is something that I've seen before in other campaigns where, oh my gosh, you only get the stretch goals if you're pledging at the $250 level. I think in particular, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, whatever it was a game that had that, and a few other games have had that concept of the stretch goals are locked behind higher tiered pledges. I think Steamforge has done it as well. Steamforge has done it where sometimes the lower entry pledges that they have won't have the stretch goals attached, and so you're like, yeah, I could buy the $70 pledge, but realistically I have to buy the $180 pledge, or I won't get all the exclusive content you have. Similarly, The Witcher Old World, I think they got into a little bit of hot water when they had 3 miniatures, 3 extra monsters that were only available as part of the all-in pledge, the all-in €280 pledge over here. Then you can go ahead and get 3 extra miniatures. Can you buy them separately? No, you have to get everything. Meaning not only is exclusive content, but it's exclusive content that is not just time sensitive, but it's additionally locked behind a paywall. It's a paywall of forcing you to go ahead and get everything, whether or not you want it, or risk not getting the specific things that you want. It forces the consumer into making an all or nothing decision, which will push some people over the edge, but will also, as usual, push people away. It's another one of those marketing things that it's, again, similar to exclusive content, similar to pushing people towards that all-in pricing, but ultimately, it's designed to get you to spend more than you would have because you're too concerned about missing out on that thing. And that's what we have over here. We have 10 different marketing tactics or whatnot. There are a whole bunch of others that work. Arguably I should have talked about stretch goals. I probably should have talked about stretch goals. I think I'm so used to stretch goals being something that I know is false that I don't really heavily engage with it as something that, stretch goals in general, stretch goals are the concept that you get extra stuff as you continue to back more. And it pushes you towards backing more, and it does incentivize backing. You're like, oh my gosh, another 3 backers and we'll unlock that content. Upgrade your pledge and we'll unlock that content. And more often than not never, but more often than not, stretch goals are prefabricated to design to pull you along that journey. It's been something that over the past several years, we've seen more and more of a shift to daily reveals as opposed to the lie of stretch goals as they go on. Again, it's not always a lie, but generally it is. But that should be another thing that we talk about in terms of this. I genuinely am so used to them by now that I didn't even think of that as something. But in general, crowdfunding is something that I am a fan of. I like what crowdfunding has done for board games. I like what crowdfunding has continued to do for board games. Some of the best board games out there have been born from crowdfunding and continue to be born from crowdfunding. Some of my favorite games are games that came from crowdfunding. This year, my 2 favorite games this year so far are DEI, Divide and Empower, and Expeditions from Stone Mountain Games. And one of those is a crowdfunded game. There are so many great games in my collection that have come from crowdfunding that I'm not complaining about the space at all. The purpose and goal of this video is that you, whoever you are watching this video, whether you're an experienced backer with 7 years under your belt, whether you've backed the first thing and you're still waiting for it to arrive, wherever you are in this journey, understand that crowdfunding does engage in a lot of FOMO, a lot of marketing, a lot of tips and tricks and business practices to try to get you as the person on the other end to ultimately spend your hard-earned dollars. And if you do, you do. And if you don't, you don't. But just understand where and when and how you're being marketed to, when something is a trick or tactic, and when something might possibly be a lie. The amount of people I've seen upset about fake funding goals usually are because they don't realize they're being lied to. I guarantee you with Bear Mountain and those limited pledges, I guarantee you that if that becomes a more common thing that I just happen to know is a common thing, I will become desensitized to it over time. I'll be like, oh yeah, that's just the thing they do. But I won't have that sense of betrayal to the next 17 companies that choose to engage with it. But others will along the way. This is no different than clickbait or any of these other marketing techniques that do have a function of working, but also kind of put a bit of a wall between themselves and the consumers. Come on, as much as I'm a fan of them as a company, they do sometimes have a wall between themselves and the consumers because they engage in some of these tactics. And that to anyone who feels betrayed by them, that can be annoying. To people who are used to them, they don't care anymore. And so that's all. This is just a general public service announcement of awareness and all that stuff. And until next time. Oh, and let me know in the comments down below which things I missed. Let me know which various things you've been bothered by or you've seen that I've missed, because maybe I'll do another video at some point, because why not? And until next time, and as always, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you found this helpful or useful, and as always, I hope you have a good one. There are 2 cows in a field, and one cow turns to the other and says, "Have you heard about this mad cow disease going around? I'm pretty worried about it." And the other cow says, "Why would I worry about it? I'm a helicopter."